Welcome to the sixth interview of Season 4 of the Perfect Par podcast. It is hard to believe that we are already halfway through the year, but I am certainly enjoying the great summer golf weather. Hopefully the insights and conversations from this podcast will help you play your best golf yet this season. For this interview, I am joined by the creator of Decade Golf, Scott Fawcett. For those who don't know what Decade is a course strategy system based on math that many of the top players in the world use, including Will Zalatoris, Bryson DeChambeau, and Stuart Sink, just to name a few. If you want to learn more about Decade, I highly recommend you check out my interview with Scott from Season 2 of the podcast on Episode 8. In this interview, we talk about why playing a single shot shape is better than working the ball, the controversial problem of distance, live and what it means for the future of golf, the science of strokes gained, and how to optimize your practice rounds. Let's jump into the interview. I guess we'll start with the Max Homa stuff. Since he won recently, he said, I think it was Saturday's broadcast when they mic'd him up, that he exclusively hits a fade. And of course, everybody on Twitter always says you need to be able to hit fades, draws, and hit the putt 10 feet past the hole every time. So what is the benefit of playing one shot shape exclusively?
Well, again, the way that I view this is I want you to hit shots close, obviously. I want you to have attempts at birdies, obviously. But I'm really more concerned with eliminating the outlier shots that you are capable of eliminating, if that makes sense. So, like, if I'm sitting here playing a fade 100% of the time, I'm never going to. I'll put like so. If I'm playing a fade 100% of the time, the left side of my shot pattern, the extreme left side, is going to be a slight draw. So I'm going to every once in a while. That's technically a double cross, but I'm never going to double cross it off the planet. And also another point that's important in that is a real double cross is for me. Now I'm going to try to play a draw. So I'm going to start it further right, and my miss is a block cut or excuse me, a block fade. And so that's just literally off the planet. I mean, and if you do that with the driver, it's a penalty almost every single time. It's a shot into the trees almost every single time. And so that's again, I want you getting looks at birdies and having opportunities, but it's the shots that you are just capable of not hitting that's important to me. So now let's go back to the idea of Max Homa. He's on 16. The par three. I don't know how long he's playing. It seems like everybody was freaking out that he made birdie.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I'm assuming it was pretty long. I remember Tiger hitting like a 3 or 4 in there one year. So I'm assuming Max is in that long iron range.
I think it was like 230 or something.
Yeah. And so he hits a nice shot, basically right at the flag. And I heard him in the some people told me to listen to the No Laying Up interview, which I should have listened to a little bit more carefully if I'm going to actually comment on it now. But he basically was saying, I know I'm not missing it left of that. So he knew his fade, like me, I could start the ball directly at that flag and know it's not going left. Well, implicit in that is that your target was right of that. He was kind of trying to back into. That's why I should have probably listened to it another time. But somebody said it's No Laying Up's interview from this week, about 10 minutes in. Somebody said go listen to that, you'll like it. And like I said, I should have listened to it again. But he was basically saying I'll never miss it left of it. But he was also trying to say I was aiming right at it. But I don't think those two things don't go together. So a shot pattern for me is a fader. I'm going to have with a forehand, let's just make up a number here, a 30-yard wide shot pattern kind of in practice in here. So the left side of my shot pattern, my start line, I'm not hitting it left of that much. And then I'm going to fade it about 10 yards off of it, which is, again, exactly what I basically think he would say. He was saying on the podcast, my 1 yard fade. I'm like, well, that's not accurate. You fade it more than that with a forehand from 230 or whatever the club was. But you're just hitting a much more repeatable shot. And again, so that would be the shot that traditionally people would say, I want to hit like a flighty draw into that back left pin in order to hit it close. Well, now your miss is going to be and it's going to be 20 or 30% of the time. It's going to be a smother left, and it's going to be pretty far left, or it's going to be a double cross. So the inner portion of it, let's call 80%, is still pretty normally distributed. But then we've got these wide tails when you're working at the opposite direction. So it's kind of like a normal distribution goes up, and then it's got like a ramp that actually goes outside, like 10% on both sides. And again, that's the shot that, again, when you finish any round of golf and think you should have shot lower, it's always one of those shots. I mean, literally, basically every single time. Like, God, why am I trying to draw a forehand into this back left pin from 230 to go look at birdie?
Yeah.
It's convenient that he happened to, again, someone asked me on Twitter, did he pull that? I'm like, well, it would have to be further left for me to start considering it a pull. That was just
Yeah.
the left side of his shot pattern. So, you know, again, now I'm just literally making up numbers, but I would consider like 70% of your shot pattern to be relatively normally distributed. And it's just the left and right side of your shot pattern. Once it starts getting outside of that, it's either a pull or a push, like you did something wrong. The rest of it inside of that's just variance.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. So, do you think there's benefit to practicing both draw and fade in practice? Because for me, that's something that's helped me develop my swing. But on the course, I try to stick to one shape.
This is a really hard one for me, and again, I'm trying to be objective, and I'm trying to say like I don't stand on the range and give lessons every day. I don't work with young men like yourself on this. I do know that Zalatoris, absolutely, he used to stand on the range and he would hit the 9 box drill all day long. He even had a deal with David Price where he'd be like mid backswing, they would say draw, and Will would have to draw it or fade it. And it's like, I know you think you were doing something there, but actually the neurons have already fired. Like you're actually not doing whatever you think you're doing. It's just not the way the brain works. It's you're too late.
Yeah.
Um, so maybe, but again, I really do believe this that just owning something is is everything. And actually, another guy sent me a DM with they were trying to play. God, I love the European Tour. They had their European Tour video, their Twitter, their social media video last week was how big of a hook can you play and still land it in the fairway. And so they had everybody on this hole just hitting like these 70-yard draws. But a couple of the guys went up there. They're like, honestly, I don't even want to try that. I don't want to see that shot. I don't want to feel that shot. And then you had, gosh, what's the European player that always that's so funny? He gets so mad at himself. Whatever his name is. He literally got up there and he just hammered the he was trying to snap hook it and he hammered the just prettiest draw ever. Which if I were up there trying to draw it, like it would be like a nice tight 10-yard draw, but that would be me feeling like I'm snap hooking it. I could not stand up there and do that. I could hit a 150-yard slice. Um, so man, I don't know the answer to that. Again, I'm really trying to be objective there. I would normally just say no. I don't think it's necessary because I want you to own something. But I mean, again, I'm walking it back a little bit here and saying that that's conceivable to me.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's a way to, especially, I've been playing golf 4 years, not 10, 15 years yet. So it's a good way for me to keep my path and face relatively in check and not get to one extreme or the other.
Hmm.
So with the shot shaping, of course, one of the first things when I went through the decade content the first time that you hammered in is driver one shape, definitely, no questions. And that's mainly because of the speed, right? And I think speed is becoming bigger and bigger in the game. And
It's
of
not because of the
course,
speed. It's because the double crosses are more penal. I do. I have said a number of times. I do think that faster players do better playing fades. I don't know what it is or why that is, but the majority of the great drivers of the golf ball, Duval, DJ, Keith Mitchell,
yeah,
I'll throw myself in there. I drive the ball great, and I do play fade.
yeah,
But then the flip side is you do have Kenny Perry, Tom Lehman, DeChambeau, some guys that do draw it with speed also. I am extremely dogmatic about one shape. I really don't care which shape with the driver. Zalatoris, when he was, when we were playing the State Am and U.S. Junior back there in that summer of 2014, he was a 6'2", 145-pound beanpole. You think he's skinny now? You should have seen him back then. But he wasn't strong enough to hit a fade. I mean, you got to have a decent amount of strength to get the club in the right position. And so he was just hitting this super stuck, slingy draw. He went actually to a different instructor back then, and that instructor is one of the best on the planet and he was trying to get him to switch to hitting fades. And I'm like, the kid doesn't miss a golf shot. What are we
yeah,
doing here? And it's like, yes, once he gets out on tour, he'll probably start fading it, but that's not because of intention. That's because his body's going to change. He's going to put on 30 pounds of muscle, which he has. He's going to be able to control things a little bit differently than he could as a high school senior. So, anyways, again, I really think that it's an important point because last week when I spoke at the open forum at the PGA show, I'm debating a couple of guys about shaping it one way, and an instructor that I just argue with constantly, a guy named Michael Finney, who I actually like. Finney, if you're listening, probably not, but if you are, I actually like you. I don't think he's very honest with how he debates me, because I said a million times I'm talking about the driver exclusively, and then he's just been hammering me on threads on Twitter all week, and all he's talking about is irons. I'm like, I don't care as much about irons, because typically the double cross isn't as bad. Typically, if a pin's on the left, that's why you're trying to draw it in there. So for me, my double cross is to the fat side.
Right.
So it's just not as big of a deal. But if I'm trying to draw a driver and I double cross it, it could go absolutely anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. So where I was going with that is speed. It's becoming bigger. Everybody's talking about speed. And, the USGA came out with their distance report or whatever 2 years back. What are your thoughts on the equipment? Does it need to be scaled back?
It doesn't matter. I mean, again, this is the argument that I get into with people again on social media. I'm just one of a million, obviously, but I can take, I not can take, I have sitting right here in my simulator, I have a 25-year-old Callaway Great Big Bertha and a 25-year-old Strata. And I absolutely can get modern ball speeds off of those clubs. I can get a 1.5, actually get higher than a 1.5 smash factor with it, which is what's really funny to me.
Yeah.
Now, what people are missing in my statement and argument there is, obviously the modern equipment is easier to hit, but the old equipment for professionals isn't so hard to hit that you still wouldn't be swinging as hard as you possibly can at it. So I just don't think there's anything you can do about it at this point, unfortunately. That golf is finally a sport. Like, I know that everybody, like, I'm 50, obviously 49, but whenever I was playing professionally in my 20s, I wanted golf to be a sport. I'm 6'2", I'm 225, like, I'm a pretty big dude. I should be a linebacker, but so I wanted golf's a sport. Golf was not a sport back then. Golf is a sport now. Like, it is actually a sport, and now it is being won by people who are athletes. And so one of the biggest things of any sport is who has the most control over the ball and can make it go the furthest. I don't care what the sport is. Like, that's literally the definition of great sports. I mean, at the end of the day, who has the most control and the most power? And in golf, that is now, I do laugh that we needed data to prove that hitting it far is as important. Like, I literally think it's comical. But I'm the poster boy of not going with it back in the day. Like, I'm the poster boy of doing it stupid. I remember when the first Big Berthas were coming out, I was playing that the Cobra that Tiger and Norman and everybody had back in the day before you were born. So don't worry about it. There was a Cobra that everybody played back in the day. And I had one too, steel shaft, 43 and a half inch. And the first great Big Berthas were coming out at 45 inches. And then the next ones were at 45 and a half and whatnot. And I
Yeah.
would just hit them on the range, and I would be like, oh, I'm hitting them all over the face. I actually remember consciously saying, they're not going that far offline, but I'm not hitting them solid. But then I never amazingly took them out on the course to say, well, let's just see how far they go. And yes, I'm hitting it all over the face, but every once in a while I catch it right in the middle, and that drive goes 25 yards further. The ones that are all over the face would have been, I do believe, hanging with my steel shaft at 43 and a half. And then so my overall average would have been from what I was all the way out to 25 yards longer. So those clubs, again, the math really backs out pretty perfectly. They would have been 10, 15 yards longer, which now, with what we know, would at least be about a half to three quarters of a shot. Again, because I literally do remember saying to somebody, I'm surprised how straight I'm hitting it, considering how awful I'm hitting it. And that's the thing. So, I don't know really what your overall question is about speed and technology. I just don't think there's anything you can do about it. It is what it is. Even if you rolled the club back, everyone's still going to be swinging hard at it, and they're still going to be hitting it in the middle on the tour. You're just going to make it harder on amateurs. I really
Right.
do believe that.
Yeah. Well, I think they've proposed, having a ball that is actually impossible of achieving, like a smash factor above 1.35 or 1.4. I don't know how that works, and having it just for the professional game. But don't you agree that that would create problems, like which professionals play it, and then
Well,
measuring amateur?
that's the bifurcation argument. And everybody just says, hey, bifurcation works in baseball. And I'm like, well, yes, but you've got contracts in baseball. So I get drafted out, and I'm not a baseball player, but I have to think that swinging a wooden bat is closer to swinging a metal bat than playing a ball that launches at 1.5 and then switching to a ball that launches at 1.35. 10% reduction would be down to 1.35. And when I make this argument, the last few years, I think the professional game of golf, everyone would agree, is in an amazing spot. And it's an amazing spot because we have Zalatoris, Doc Redman, Maverick, Scotty Scheffler, Victor Hovland, just on and a litany of players under the age of 27. When I was at the FBR, not the FBR, is that the FBR? Whatever Phoenix is. When I was at the Phoenix Open 2 years ago, 3 years ago, Jesus, time flies. Just before COVID, I'm standing on the range. I'm talking with Mark Blackburn, and we got Kevin Chappell right there. And Chappell's got on a hoodie. He's got on shorts. He's got on like mid calf socks. I would look ridiculous in that as a 48-year-old at the time. But he looked cool. And when I turned around and I saw 20 kids standing there, they all looked exactly like him. They didn't look like me with some cotton dockers on and a white shirt. They looked like him. And so those kids are envisioning themselves like, I can see myself out here much more than whenever I was a kid and I'm watching Steve Elkington and his Silk Bobby Jones stuff. They see themselves. I think that's important for the health of the game moving forward. And when I make the argument against bifurcation, people think that I'm like acting like they couldn't break 80 or something. Like they're really good at golf, but you finish the NCAA's on Sunday or whatever day it is, and all those guys that are gonna get the exemptions, they get them starting 3 days later at the Memorial.
Right.
So they could not adjust their distances. Like they couldn't adjust in time. And then people counter that with, well, they could practice with both balls. Well, then they probably wouldn't be one of the top amateurs because they're wasting half their time compared to the game. So they could switch to the pro ball early. Well, then they're damn sure not going to be ranked in the top 100. You got to be ranked in the top 10 for PGA Tour University. Like nobody's going to give up those PGA Tour U starts. So bifurcation is just fundamentally different in golf because you have to go earn your job. You're not given a contract and you're not on a team to go through those growing pains of switching from a wooden bat to a metal bat, or metal bat, vice versa. I just can't believe, I can't imagine that change is as hard as changing the golf ball would be. And the reason I believe that is, I quit playing the first time professionally in like 2001. I don't remember which year the groove rule came in, the new grooves, if it was 2008, 9, or 10. I think it was like 9, 10, or 11, something like that, because I hadn't played much golf all that year. And I'd been playing with my just normal golf clubs. And I decided last second to enter Q school, obviously a great idea. And I had to get new wedges. And so I had like 3 or 4 weeks to get ready. And my wedge game, it's not like I couldn't hit the green, but the spin was totally different. Chipping was totally different. It's the exact same analogy if you were to roll the ball back. And it took me a few weeks. Again, if I finish the NCAA championship and I've got a few weeks to adjust, well, now I've probably burned 2 or 3 of my 7 or 9 exemptions, whichever one it is. I don't remember right now. And also now I've only got another 2 months until the FedEx Cup playoffs. Like I've literally wasted a third of my time just adjusting.
Yeah.
I don't think it works.
Yeah. Do you think golf courses need to adapt for the speed, or do you think we're just going to see a shift in the way golf is played?
I mean, we're literally talking about such a small percentage of players. Like golf just isn't too easy. Again, when I was on the Hack It Out podcast with Lou and those guys, Lou is way better at researching and reading all of these reports. I couldn't care less, honestly. That's what's funny
Yeah.
is it's this hill that I've argued on for years. I'm like, I really don't care. Like, why am I arguing
Yeah.
about this? I couldn't care less technically. But Lou did a lot of research into it, and it's just like nobody plays the right tees anyways. We've got the tee it forward initiative already. Like, there's no way if you roll it back that everybody's going to magically grow a brain and think, well, never mind, I'm going to go ahead and play the right tees now. And really where I think that it's such a bad idea is because a guy like you who, over the last 2 years, I'm sure you've gotten bigger and started hitting it further, and I'm sure that's fun. And now all of a sudden to take you and be like, guess what? We're going to roll you back to 13. That would suck. I don't think you'd quit the game, but I don't think you could not argue that some players would play less. It would be a big turnoff. And so that's what we don't want to have happen. We don't want to intentionally decrease rounds just so some small percentage of the population's not, hitting it too far. And again, there are a number of amateurs at everybody's home course that do hit it far. Absolutely. And if they are 5 handicaps, it's because they can't control it. So it's not like they're too good at golf. They need to probably be hitting it a little softer until they get more control over it.
Right.
What do you
Do
think on
you
that? How do you view it?
So my stance is on non-professional golf courses and non-professional setups. Yeah, 100%. We don't need to add distance. More than half the people I play with at my home course, maybe hit it 240, 250 yards with all the new equipment. Um, Professional tournaments, I kind of like the way they do it now, where you have a handful of courses on tour that play 76, 7,700 yards, but you also have a few older ones like Pebble Beach that offer unique challenges even at a shorter distance. So I don't think
Rarely
much
on tour,
needs to
just for what it's
change.
worth, rarely on tour do they play it over about 7,200 yards. I mean, so they'll have these 76 or 700-yard courses, 72, maybe 73 ish, but that's just giving them more tee options throughout the week. They'll may play one back and one up and vice versa the next day. They don't play the full yardage ever. I mean, ever.
Okay. Yeah. I don't have as much knowledge. I mean, I've never even seen a PGA Tour event in person, but from
You
watching it
haven't?
on TV, yeah, no, I haven't.
What's the closest one to you?
The FedEx in Memphis.
Is there a Corn Ferry event anywhere close to you?
Okay, I have been to a Corn Ferry event. There's one just south of Nashville that I
Okay.
went to. Do you think we're gonna hit a speed ceiling where it keeps going up, keeps going up? Do you think there's gonna come a point in the future where everything is going to have to level off?
I do actually, and this is what's frustrating because this is where again the layperson on social media they think that distance is just compounding to infinity. It's been locked, whether you want to call it smash factor, COR, or whatever. The ball can't launch at more than 1.5. I think it's hilarious now that people are trying to nitpick. It's not launched, whatever. Smash factor. It's been able to do that for 20 years. Yes, it's easier to do now, but that has been possible and locked forever. And so if you go buy a new driver and you say, I gained 30 yards, it's not because that driver's amazing. It's because your old driver sucked. Like, there is no two ways about that. You cannot go gain distance right now by buying a new driver. Sorry, that's why I'm not sponsored by any reps. I probably won't ever be. Like, that's just a fact.
Yeah,
Irons are clearly just irons. Whatever looks best to you and getting the shaft and the head right for you. But if you've got a driver you like and you launch it in the high 1.4 X's, 4.7, 4.8, you ain't getting any better than that. And so, what I will add to that is, though, I do think there's an upper bound of usable ball speed. Whether you actually, I was about to say on the PGA Tour, this would, I guess, technically be for anywhere, and it's like 195. Going, I mean, again, which everyone's like, well, that's really fast.
yeah,
I get it, but like, I don't think you're going to see 220-mile-an-hour ball speed on the PGA Tour. At some point, the shot pattern's just too wide. And if you're just always in there's something out there in the way, whether it's trees
yeah.
or hazards, like there's something eventually, especially if you're playing any sort of a tour caliber golf course. So at some point, I do believe it's not functional only because it's just really hard to shut it down. So if you've got that kind of speed with the driver, you literally don't even feel like you're touching a 9 iron and it goes 190. Like at some point, if you hit every drive to 100 yards and you just really don't have the ability to hit a 100-yard shot, like it kind of becomes irrelevant. So you wind up hitting way too many 3 woods or mini drivers off the tee. So I do think that it's at like 195. I don't know what Bryson's ball speed actually was his last year out on tour, but I would be surprised if it was, let's see, if it was much over 190. I should know this
Yeah.
since I've worked with the guy, but um, off the tee, his ball speed, club head speed was 130. I don't know how ball speed
Goodness
on this.
gracious.
Yeah, I mean that's flying. But even with an optimal smash factor there, 130. I mean, 130 times 1.5 is eh, 130 times 1.5 is 195. So even if he was launching it perfect, which I know he has definitely struggled with smash factor out there, I don't. I just don't. There's just not a problem. He was 132 miles an hour the prior year when in a full season, which is so insane.
Uh, Yeah,
God, that's insane.
I mean,
His strokes gained off the tee was 1.162. Distance from the edge of the fairway, he was 185th. Left rough tendency 177, right rough tendency 162. He hit it all over the lot,
yeah,
but it wasn't so much all over the lot that he didn't find the majority of shots.
yeah. Do you think, looking at college golf recruiting, of course, college coaches are looking for a lot of speed. Do you think a lot of the higher level programs are going to set kind of a limit on the lower end of their ball speed on kind of what they're looking for? Do you think it's going to be less and less common that we see people, playing with 170 or 165?
Well, yeah, because they're not going to be competitive. I mean, I don't think they will intentionally set a lower bound, but their scoring average will set the lower bound. I mean, this is where it's difficult because William Knaut, the kid that won the D3, he won the Nelson Award last year while graduating with a physics degree from Carnegie Mellon. Now he's in the PhD stats program at Columbia. Like this, he just came and spent a week with me a couple weeks ago to play some golf since he's in the Byron Nelson right by my house in a couple months. And I'll be honest, like he was a better player than I expected. Like he was a solid golfer. But we were talking about this towards the end of his senior year last year. He wanted to try to turn pro, and I'm like, dude, your ball speed's in the low 170s, which again is hammered. But he's already been doing speed training and lifting. If he hadn't been, I'd be like, well, you got more in the tank. But I think he's kind of like at some point, like, well, yeah, that's about all he got, man. I mean, he's not the biggest guy. He's probably 5'9" and 150 or something like that. That's about what you got, dude. And, as a result, I don't think he would be competitive. I don't know what the average ball speed was on tour last year, but I guarantee it was
I think
the
it was like
last.
172.
Yeah, that's going to go up every single year from now on. I mean, and eventually, like I don't know exactly what the full range of like a normal distribution of ball speeds is on tour, but I bet it's throwing Bryson out at the top end and throwing out the top five and the bottom, however many. I bet it's like a 20-mile-an-hour window, if that. I think that 20-mile-an-hour window just keeps shifting up, and eventually the upper range stops, and then the lower range just keeps on moving up. So the ball speed just keeps on. At some point, once it gets to the average ball speed in the high 170s, it'll still keep going up, but it'll be instead of a mile an hour a year, it'll start being like zero point 0.1. Because again, at some point, again, just looking at Bryson, he hit it all over the lot, and he's so good off the tee. He would have to be so bad at everything else in order to
Yeah.
get back to zero. Just get back to tour average. He would have to be horrific at everything else, which that's kind of part of my strategy for trying the senior tour is I feel like if I can get my ball speed to just averaging in the low 180s, and I've always driven it pretty straight, as long as I can keep that, I think my strokes gained against the senior tour would be over 2 off the tee. Like against my competition, it would be ridiculous. I really believe it would be ridiculous. I don't think I could literally be bad enough at everything else to not
Yeah.
be pretty darn good out there. And so I think it's silly to say like the only thing I'm trying to figure out how to do because I keep on just I'm not hurting myself because of trying to swing harder right now. I'm hurting myself from 20 years of nagging injuries from playing golf. But I do feel like if I can get that ball speed up there and then just be a good lag putter, like I don't know how that's not dominant.
Yeah. Yeah. So, other than speed, what do you think the future of golf looks like? What do you think is going to come in that's new and maybe we haven't seen before?
I mean, this is going to sound terrible, but the first thing that popped in my head is just more people are going to listen to what I teach. I mean,
Well, I mean,
again, like Max Homa, like again, it was comical to me that last week here I am debating. Again, these guys from Ping, they're way smarter than I am,
right.
but even they're pro. And I actually did text Marty Jertson, who I really respect. It's funny because I definitely think of my ability as a player combined with my ability of studying course management and studying the math of the game. I think I'm in a class of about one or two people on the planet. And I would say that Marty's smarter than me with everything golf related, but I have studied course management in more detail than him. Um, but he's a better player than me. The guy made the cut in the PGA Championship as a club pro. Like the dude can flat out play and he can flat out send it. Also, he's part of the STAC program of Sasho. Those guys are amazing. Um, but their position is that hitting it straight is optimal because we're optimizing with the driver because we're optimizing distance, which I agree. Technically, the definition of a fade or a draw is a glancing blow. That's why the spin axis gets knocked off off axis a little bit. So it is a glancing blow. But I do believe that predictability of curve is worth giving up a little bit of distance. I wouldn't say 30 yards, but a few yards, which I think the number is about 3 to 5, maybe 6, with
Yeah.
how I'm viewing it. Um, because, and this is what I was surprised at, is they're saying in their studies, their computer studies, that hitting it straight does produce a wider shot pattern, but the extra width in shot pattern does not negate the gain in distance. So in a computer model, hitting it straight is the optimal way to hit the driver. But I'm sitting here thinking to myself as we're kind of debating this, I'm like, I was floored. I mean, I literally was like, what? Even your computer model shows that the pattern's a little bit wider. So if a computer can't hit it straighter, now try being on the 72nd hole on number 18 at TPC Sawgrass,
Yeah.
and you don't know which way it's falling. Now,
Yeah.
again, the shot pattern may in a computer only be a couple yards wider,
Right.
I just believe that in reality, and this is again where I back to arguing with Finney, I do agree this is anecdotal. I'm saying I can't prove my side either, but I don't believe they can prove theirs either. And I'm just saying anecdotally with how I drive it, with how Keith Mitchell drives it, with how you watch the best players. And so I did just think it was hilarious that the week I'm debating this, and then Finney's trying to troll me on Twitter, and here we go. Max Homa literally, when he was mic'd up on Saturday in 13 fairway, Trevor Immelman says, well, what kind of shape are we thinking here? And it wasn't even. He's like, it's a fade. It's always a fade. Like, duh. Like, I'm not even. That's a dumb question to me. Like, it's what Max is. Obviously, Trevor, if you're listening, I don't think that was a dumb question. I think you're just, let's get into this guy's head. But I'm saying like the way Max viewed it was like, I don't even consider that question. And it's funny because going back to Zalatoris, when I was playing with him when he was a junior, so before I even caddied for him, I was documenting a lot of these threads on an online poker forum, a lot of these rounds rather, and it was just funny because I came across one looking for something else a couple months ago, and it was me talking about Will, and he had made a comment. He was like, "Dude, playing with you is so boring because I know exactly what you're going to do on every single shot," and I was like, "That's the point." Where Will has this paradox of choice because he can hit a million shots. And again, this is where he is a unicorn because he was also number one in strokes gained approach last year. So part of me also is like, yeah, but again, I do think you can work the irons. I want to make that very clear. I just think you need a good reason to. I do believe that Will works his irons more than is necessary. I do believe it's also conceivable his strokes gained approach would have been even better. Now, obviously, the other argument would be that it would have been worse.
Yeah.
But
of course.
number one, there's no reason he could not have done better by doing less. I do think that we try to work it too much. I have no idea what the question was. I was trying to think of how I was going to tie this, but what was the question there? I was trying to tie it back in all of a sudden.
What other than speed is going to be big?
It's going to be everybody working the driver one direction. I mean, again, it's funny because if you go back to when Bryson won the U.S. Open, I posted right after it. I was like, the next couple years on tour are going to be absolutely comical because 100% of players are going to chase distance, and the vast majority of them are going to get it wrong. They're going to just start trying to swing harder, and that's not what it is. You have to get your body ready, and then you have to do speed training, and then you accidentally start hitting it harder. And it was funny. I did not expect Rory to be the first one to start driving it terrible, and then it was like at Bay Hill or something like 4 or 5 months later he was like, I just started trying to hit it harder. And I'm like, well, dude, you're at about mid 180s. Like, again, you're not the biggest guy. You're already really fit. You're not going to get more fit than Rory. Like, I think you're kind of at your number already. So I definitely think, I was trying to think where I was going with that. He also said, I'm going to try to only play a fade. And then it's like, well, that didn't work. I don't think he's taking any of his ideas from A to Z. He's taking them in like A to about G. And like, well, that's not quite right, dude. You gotta stick with this for like a year, and then once you just own it again, I don't care. He seems like he would sling a draw better than fading it to me. I'm totally.
That's what he's always done.
Yeah. But the one thing that I will say that the reason I'm not gonna say I prefer a fade, But the one thing that I do like about a fade is if I fade my driver, I can draw my 3 wood by just playing it back in my stance a little bit. So you wind up having two shapes off the tee. That's not the same with if you're drawing your driver. I think it's harder to have a 3 wood or something set up that is set up for fades just because of ball position. But again, I'm not a club fitter. I don't teach, so maybe it's actually no. It's nothing more than just getting an open faced 3 wood. Like it might be that
Right.
simple. I really don't know.
Yeah. So other than speed, which has been a big talk in golf, of course, last year, Live coming around kind of messed up the whole golf world. What are your overall thoughts on Live? Is it good for golf?
Is it good for golf? No. I mean, I don't watch much golf, and I didn't really care when the first live tournaments were played. But then the first whatever tour event, whether it was Sawgrass or whatever it was, where everyone should have been there, that's when I was like, oh, this does kind of suck not having DJ and like DJ and Brooks are probably two of. If you said write down your favorite players, DJ and Brooks are coming out in the top five for sure. I mean, it would literally be like Zalatoris. I think it'd be Zalatoris, DJ Brooks. I really do actually think that would be my top three. Tiger, notwithstanding, obviously, but I don't consider him a full time player. But I think those would be my top three. So it really sucks to not have them there. But what I don't understand in the argument, and this is where I'm not going to get political, don't worry, but if the only argument against it is the Saudis are bad people, they do bad things. Okay, well, we don't have to go that far back in our country's history. It's a little blemished at a minimum. And do we want I don't know how long slavery lasted in this country, but it was too long. It was however many years too long. And if we had had somebody like, hey, and around the world, like we were a more global community, like, hey, you really shouldn't do that. Maybe we would have figured it out quicker. If we want them to join, we want to get rid of terrorism. We want to get, women's rights over there. If we want to help them be better people, shutting them out on an island is not going to work. Then you get North Korea, and that's not good. You don't want North Korea with a shitload of money. Like that's a bad thing. So from a political standpoint, I think it's one of the best things that the world can do. I really believe that as a lay political scholar, but I want them to be better people just like everybody else does. So I think we have to support them, not isolate them.
Do you think Live will survive?
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't see how it wouldn't. I mean, they just have so much money. And now at this point, so many egos. I just this is where it's hard because again, like professional sports, almost by definition, everyone's like the PGA Tour is a monopoly. I'm like, yeah, that's what professional sports are.
Yeah.
The USFL failed because we only want to watch the best players play football. I don't really care about the second tier. I don't need to watch football year round.
Yeah.
I but they've got so much money and they're throwing it around so aggressively. And Greg Norman is never like I bet he would fund it himself for a year just to not lose an argument. And I would assume the Saudis have got some ego involved also. I can't imagine how it will fail because at some point it does. I mean, again, like I watched a little bit of a broadcast. I don't get the team competition aspect, but I guess some people are actually enjoying that. Again, like I'm not a golf purist, obviously, by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think that golf is an individual sport. I even think that college golf is comical. Like, like it's a team sport, but it's just not.
Right.
You're rooting for your team, but if you asked any player in the NCAA's in a blind ballot, you can finish second individually and your team can win, or you can finish first individually and your team gets second.
Yeah.
I'd be stunned in a blind ballot if that's not 90% the player win. I mean, maybe I'm the asshole, but I would certainly take the win. I don't know.
Right.
I really don't know
Yeah.
if that's me just confirming to the world I'm a bad guy, but it's an individual sport, man.
Right. Right.
But to the telecast and stuff, I thought Frank Nobilo actually he and I were texting last week while I was at the PGA show, and he told me that they had did a dry run on Tuesday with Max, and I was like, with the with the AirPod in, I was like, that's brilliant because everybody practices with AirPods in. I mean, it's not like that's going to distract him, and if as long as, hey Trevor, you're the only one that's talking in his ear, so it's not like he's going to a control booth. And Trevor, hey, shut up while he's hitting a shot. I think Trevor can handle that. He seems like a pretty astute golfer. I thought it was brilliant, and I don't think it's a distraction for Max. And I actually, I really, I almost, I thought this. I checked the odds on Max because normally I think that all the gambling stuff is just stupid. The odds are ridiculous. But I really did think to myself consciously, this guy's going to be hyper focused. I mean, he's going to be telling the world, here's what I'm trying to do. I really thought that there was a good chance he wins. Like, as good of a chance as you're ever getting on the PGA Tour since win rates are so low. But here's a guy that's, yeah, he's won 6 times in the last 3 years or however long it is, but his win rate is still low. And the fact that he did win when mic'd up, I don't think that's a coincidence. But I also think that that's instructive for a kid like you or whoever other kids are listening to this. The guy was really focused. I think that's 90% of the battle in golf. Back to the idea of not hitting outlier shots. I do believe that the vast majority of outlier shots are all either working the ball the other direction, you weren't quite clear on exactly what you were trying to do with the shot, or you just weren't paying attention. Again, it's all relative to your skill level. I mean, like, so if you're a 10 handicap, your worst 15% of shots are one of those things. As a +4, the worst 15% of my shots are those things.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. So I want to talk a little bit about some common questions surrounding decade I get when I talk to people about it. And the first one is strokes gained. The number of people who still don't understand what strokes gained is kind of surprises me. So could you explain what strokes gained is and how people can use it to help them?
It's super simple. The easiest way to explain this is rather than thinking in feet on a putt or yards of a shot or condition of the lie, think in strokes to hole out. So if I have an 8-foot putt on the PGA Tour, my make rate is 50-50. It takes me an average of 1.5 strokes to hole out. So rather than thinking at 8 feet, I'm 8 feet, think I'm at 1.5 strokes. Now, if I make that 8-foot putt, I have moved the ball 1.5 strokes closer to the hole in only one stroke, so I picked up a half a shot against my expectation. If I two putt it, I've lost a half a shot and I can't hit the ball 1.5 times. So I'm either gaining or losing a half a shot from 8 feet.
Yeah.
32 feet is where they average, and there's daily adjustments, to get nitpicky,
Of
based
course.
on pin positions and greens and everything. But that's how it works generically. Now we go to 32 feet, and that's where they average 2 strokes to hole out. So if I two putt from 32 feet, I have moved it 2 strokes closer to the hole in 2 strokes. That's a zero. Obviously, making and three putting would be gaining or losing one shot. Now we go to 100 yards in the fairway. On the PGA Tour, they average 2.8 shots to hole out from 100 yards in the fairway. So again, rather than thinking 100 yards, think I'm 2.8 shots. Now, if I hit it to 8 feet, I've hit it from 2.8 shots to 1.5 shots. I've moved that ball 1.3 shots closer to the hole in one shot. So I gained zero point 0.3 shots by doing that. And so then you just run that algebra on every single shot you hit. We have a starting baseline for every shot. So a 400 yard par four, I think, is 3.98 shots. But for ease, let's just call it 4 shots on a 400 yard hole. I hit it 300 yards down the fairway. Now I've moved it from 4 shots to hole out to 2.8 shots to hole out. If I gain zero point 0.2 shots, if I then move that to 8 feet, I've now gained another zero point 0.3 shots. Now I've gained 0.5 shots. And then I make my 8-foot putt. I've gained one full shot because I gained 0.2 on the drive, 0.3 on the approach, and 0.5 on the putt. I made a 3 on a hole that I should make a 4 on, and it all sums. I mean, that's really how simple it is. And again, now we know every number from fairway bunkers, rough, trees. If I hit it out of bounds, that I haven't moved it anywhere. I'm just re-teeing. So I've just lost 2 shots. I mean, that's the most obvious example there is. I lost 2 shots by not moving it a single inch closer to the hole.
Yeah. And for the people still skeptical of getting on board with it, because I know there are some people that will be, what is the real benefit of using strokes gained over like greens in regulation or putts per round?
Well, the real benefit is nothing more than you get actual data, what went good and what went bad. I mean, I'm trying to think of the best example of how to explain this. Fairways hit. If somebody called you and said, or called you, if somebody you were talking to somebody and they said, I hit 57% of the fairways today, is that good or bad? I don't know. Did you hit a sandwich off the tee or did you hit it 360? I mean,
Yeah.
I need more information. Did you hit it in the water half the time? I mean, so fairways hit in isolation is essentially a totally irrelevant statistic. Um, you want to be maximizing distance, but at some point, if you're hitting it in water hazards too often, then that's a bad outcome. So the traditional statistics, I'm just trying to think of one. Greens and regulation. Actually, this is where Mark Brody is way smarter than me. He's a dean, he's an Ivy League business school professor. I get it. The guy's better at
Yeah.
math and smarter than me. This is where he correctly talks about you just have to think of these things in fractions of shots. I was talking with Mark one day. I was actually up in Canada, of all places, in Vancouver, and we were talking about what's the most relevant statistic or whatever, and I was like, greens and regulation, and Mark was like, actually that's the least relevant because it's perfectly correlated to score almost. So if somebody tells you I hit 65% of the greens in regulation, I can pretty much tell you what their scoring average is. Again, you've got terrible putters and chippers and whatever, great putters, but
Yeah.
for the most part, greens and regulation is what's going to drive your scoring average. And so aside from that one, the traditional stats, certainly putts per green in regulation, is totally irrelevant because we're not taking into account the length of the starting putt. Up and down rates is kind of important, but you might just be a great putter. I mean, there was a stats board that a college had one time that somebody asked me to comment on. They're like, "This looks amazing," and I'm like, "Yeah, but they're missing so much. The up and down rate, the people that were first and second in up and down rate, because you can see like this long stats board, and they'd be like, "Oh, well, that's the best chipper," and I'm like, "Well, isn't it important that they're also number one and two in 4 to 8 foot putting?" And then the guys that were literally eighth and ninth in up and down rates, they were eighth and ninth. Like it could not have been more perfect than it was. The best short game was the best short putters. The worst short game was the worst short putters. And there's just so many things like that where unless you're controlling out each aspect. So again, with strokes gained, we control out the putting portion of it. We control out the chipping portion of it. So I'm not asking, did you get this ball up and down? I'm asking, how close did you hit this chip? And that's fundamentally different than what your up and down rate was, because you might just be the worst 4 foot putter on the planet, but the best chipper on the planet. That would be really unusual, but it's certainly possible.
Yeah. At what point in strokes gained, when you're looking at your strokes gain after the round per shot, at what's the threshold for a bad shot based on strokes gain metrics? Is that losing point 0.3, 0.5?
So that actually might be an issue. Again, this is where again I try to pay guys like Mark Brody and Lou Stagner, these guys that are real data scientists, as much credit as I can because they're so good at manipulating the ShotLink database. And I graduated from college in 1996 and functionally haven't used my brain since. So I don't know how to manipulate the majority of the ShotLink database the way those guys do. But on PGA Tour, when you've got tour credentials to log in, they have a shot gained or lost zero point 0.5 shots. I just always use that as a good barometer when I'm going through a new player. You can just highlight this button that says shots that gain or shots that lost more than zero point 0.5, and it just kind of highlights them, and then I'll go look at those shots. So it's not like I have any math saying these are the worst 10% of shots or whatever, but that's where they drew a line in the sand. Obviously, I'm sure just because it's a kind of a round number, even though it's not even a round number whatsoever. It's kind of a round point in there. But also, then what we use is all the time with my younger players, I'll show them how many shots on any given week they lost more than zero point 0.5 shots on. And for some of these guys in a bad week, it could be 7, 8, 9 pretty easily. And there'll be shots where it's like you were 110 in the fairway, you missed the green, way short sided in a bunker, and you lost 0.55 shots or something. Like, did you have to do that? And then when I try to illustrate to them, and I haven't quoted this number, COVID, I've kind of lost all my stats, but this number is somewhere approximately correct. I think it was either the 2005 or the 2008 season. In the entire season, Tiger hit 23 approach shots total that lost more than a half a shot. Like he just didn't
Wow.
hit bad shots.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, that's probably a function of being pretty good at golf, but also I do believe that his strategy was just impeccable. And these guys, again, on tour, they're so good. that as long as they're not trying to shape it the other way and hit a double cross, or they're just playing too aggressive, or they're playing with their head halfway up their butt, they're capable of not hitting bad shots, materially bad shots. And again, that's where I just have to try to use this stuff with these players. Again, on a weekly basis, it's comical when you go through 8 shots in a single tournament that lost more than zero point 0.5 shots. You have to go through 8 with these guys, and just all of them are just dumb. And again, it always comes back to this Tiger Five that I talk about. How many double bogeys, how many bogeys on par fives, 3 putts, blown easy saves, and bogeys with 9 iron or less. Like those are the shots where you're just like finishing, you're like, I should have done better than that. That was stupid. Those will always kind of show up in that lost point 0.5 shots or more. Actually, what's funny is when we were designing the decade stats interface, I'm sure you've actually seen it now that I think about it. Like I sent a screenshot of the PGA Tours, that shot link interface that I'm talking about. I'm like, this is what I want it to look like, and I swear to God, it's identical. Or I'm like, well, I didn't want it to actually be identical, but you can get in there and you can highlight that lost point 0.5 shots or more. And that's what I tell people, like, dude, don't bother going through your whole round. Highlight those 0.5s, and then you have to be objective. You have to get in there and really say, could I have done something different than that? Was I really committed? Again, that's the mental scorecard that we track in Decade. Also, you will see a high correlation between your negative mental scorecard holes and those shots that lose more than zero point 0.5 shots. They are extremely correlated. Now, again, this is where separating out the bias of hitting a bad shot and wanting to chalk it up to mental and not physical, that it's a really difficult thing to do. But at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. So my next question is about practice rounds, because I feel like practice rounds for me, and I've talked to other people who have had the same experiences, sometimes they don't feel as effective as they could be. So what can you do in a practice round to optimize your performance for the rest of the week?
Get really good at using the satellites before your practice round. I mean, this is where it's funny. Like, and this is again where I try to be objective as a 49-year-old man that's been playing professional golf essentially on and off for 30 years. Um, Man, once you're good at using the satellites and laying the triangles out as I show, your shot patterns, your center lines, like there's just nothing really hidden anymore. It's just, and so you need to play a practice round because we got to get, okay, how firm are the greens? What's the rough like? What's around the green? But honestly, I'm falling asleep when I play a practice round by about number 4 now. Like I really find them excruciating because even, yes, I want you walking the green and I want you thinking of the decade, the modifiers for the A analyzed portion of decade. I want you like, well, right's a 2, that's a -1, that's a 3. But also, man, once you're good at the satellites, you can kind of stay on the fairway and be like, well, there's a bunker over there, and I can tell it's a little deeper. I bet you that's a 1. I mean, like, again, they really do become excruciating. So what I think to your question is, how can you play better practice rounds? Be more prepared to play your practice round. Um, Again, this gets back to, well, that's a lot of work. It is. How bad do you want improvement? And this is what's, again, I say this all the time, but when you go practice your putting, you actively think you're getting better right then. And maybe you are, maybe you aren't. You might be getting worse if you're practicing the wrong thing. It's entirely possible you're getting worse, especially if you're practicing brain dead. It's really possible you're getting worse. Um, but it's almost impossible for the time you spend away from the course thinking about course management, thinking about mindset, and then just looking at satellite images of the holes you're about to play, because everybody's more comfortable. Even if your course is hard, your home course is hard, you're more comfortable on it than an away course. And a lot of what we're trying to do with Decade and with satellites is simply removing that indecision that comes out where you're just like, I don't really know what I feel here. That's what we're trying to really remove. So when I'm playing a practice round, I'm going to be prepared for my tee shots. I'm going to play my tee shots as aggressive as I possibly can because it's easier to hit driver and then get them there. You're like, well, that wasn't it. I bet it's 3-wood then. It's harder to hit 3-wood and then get up there and be like, man, I wonder if I could have gotten away with driver here. Like, just how far would it have gone? So I want you, you might lose an extra couple golf balls in a practice round, but I want you playing as aggressively as you can because it's easier to back it off. And then honestly, from there, I think that just taking and starting with like 5 or 6 balls in the middle of the green, dead center of the green, then put it out to each corner. and then go to the front right and putt that one to the back left, to the back right, and just kind of putt them around and then back towards the
Yeah.
middle. So there's just trying to write down this chip shot broke here. You know, like that's good luck remembering that. Good luck getting the exact same shot. I think you should be hitting a bunch of basic chips because what's what we want to get Tiger Five. How many blown easy saves? We want to convert those. I don't care you going to try and some flop shot. Really think you're going to wind up with that flop shot in this tournament? Like I want you to get really good at those basic shots within 3 to 5 yards of the edge of the green to pins that are 5 or 6 yards from the edge of the green. Get good at those. Get a general lay of the land and your speed in lag putting, 20 to 40 feet, and then run the script.
Yeah. So I know you've already mentioned it a little bit in this podcast about trying to play on the Champions Tour. When can we expect to see you on TV?
um, well, good news or bad news, I'm not sure which one it is. I had an MRI last Friday for some torn. We definitely thought I was going to have a labrum tear in my left shoulder. I don't. I've got
Oh,
some
that's good.
arthritis. Yeah, I mean it's good, but honestly, where I'm at, it's a 3 month rehab. I'd like to fix it and just know it's fixed. Actually, I was supposed to be. My surgeon was going to come over here at 3 o'clock when we finish this, and we were going to play Pebble Beach and talk over some ideas, but he wound up his nanny couldn't come. Um, I got to definitely figure out some sort of rehab for my left shoulder. It's funny because like I can swing fine, like it just starts hurting if I'm pressing overhead or bench pressing. So it's just like it's a little out of place, but it's gotten to where as I come into my follow through and your lead arm starts kind of wrapping around as it
Yeah.
starts getting past, I guess whatever this would be, externally rotating, it starts hurting. So now it's like kind of affecting my swing through the ball because I'm like trying to keep it in front. So the goal is, I mean, the goal is I turned 50 on July 4th. I have literally the worst birthday basically for senior tour golf because you can enter Q school as a 49-year-old as long as you turn 50 before June 30th. So I missed that by a couple of days. And then the US Senior Open is 2 weeks before my birthday. So I missed that by just a couple of weeks. But the Senior British Open is like the last week of July. So my goal, fingers crossed, is to just really work my butt off here, hopefully for the next 6 months, and then take a trip to Europe and try to do some seminars in Spain and Denmark and Germany, and then go hit the Senior British Open qualifying and give it a whirl. And then Q School is November, late October and November for Senior Tour. So that's the game plan. I mean, again, I think I kind of laugh about it, but like I typically still play pretty good. Like I actually, I mean, again, I entered Corn Ferry Q School last year, shot 7 under and missed by one, which considering I hadn't played golf in 7 weeks, I'll take. And then I didn't touch my clubs basically 3 or 4 times until an NTPGA event a couple weeks ago. And what's funny is I honestly don't even know what I shot. What did I shoot? 70. I really don't know what I shot. I think I shot 74, 77. But this golf course, no offense if you're listening to it, architect, I won't mention who it is or what course it is, but it's a really dumb course. There are
Yeah.
bunkers on literally in the dead center of 9 holes, but they're just the target. They're small bunkers. You don't drop back to 3 wood, you just send it right at them. And I literally hit it in every single one of them on the back nine. I striped the driver down the dead center of the fairway. And what was funny is, in hindsight, the one on 17, I probably should be dropping back to mini driver. I probably am getting too aggressive there. But after roasting it right into that, and it starts at 340. And then the one on the last hole, I've never been more confident over, and this bunker's like 12 yards wide, if that.
Yeah.
I perfectly visualized this shot starting about 15 yards left of it and then just cutting right into the bunker. And I swear to God, I hit this shot straight through the vapor trail of what I just visualized right into the bunker. I'm like, if I could get that level of confidence over every shot, I mean, I've never been more confident the shot I was about to hit, and then I just roasted right in it. So even though I shot bad, I really played pretty good. So I really am excited if I can just get healthy enough. And honestly, the other problem is I don't really enjoy just playing that much. So I got to find a group of like some 45 to 50-year-old non-alcoholics, which is a tough one to find on a Wednesday at the country clubs.
Yeah.
I mean, the demographic I'd like to play with is if they're out there on Wednesday, they probably don't have a lot going on. So I don't really want to get around that, which is not my strong suit. So getting out and playing enough is really going to be my biggest problem.
Yeah. I want to wrap it up with what's coming for decade. You know, what in 2023, 2024, and beyond, what new is coming up for decade?
There's just not much, man. I mean, again, like it's like what's new with 2 plus 2? Like not much. I mean, again, I am hoping the one thing that I think would be great if I could get myself to play more is it would be great to make content for the Decade app of here's what I mean. Like everybody's like, I want to get better. I'm like, okay, well, I'm clearly trying to get as good as I can right now. And here's like I've got a channel right now, Scott's Desk. I've thought about a daily Scott's, daily. God, don't want to send it that, but a weekly vlog channel or something like that, where I'm just,
Yeah.
here's what I did this week. Here's what went well. Here's what didn't. Here's what I'm going to do next week. If you guys want to model it, like this is what I'm trying to do. I mean, so for the last few months, I've just been trying to put on as much muscle as possible to kind of act like shock absorbers for all of these joint issues, and I've done good with that. So now it really is about just finding time to play and practice. But again, like with the app, we need to make the stats entry a little bit more simple. We need to make it a little bit prettier, if you will. And then I just need to kind of keep on creating new content to just keep on illustrating the same points. But it's the same stuff I always say. Nothing changes.
Right. Right. So to conclude the episode, I have a few questions I ask everybody. I can't remember if I asked you these questions the first time you were on, so we're gonna ask them again
See if my
anyway.
answer changed.
So, what are your favorite books to recommend?
The Art of Learning by a Mile by Josh Waitzkin. It is the foundation of everything that I and Zalatoris worked on. It's funny because if you go to the Tim Ferriss podcast, it launched in early 2014. His second guest was Josh Waitzkin. And as I'm just listening to the podcast, they're talking about some meditation, talking about peak performance. Like it was a great podcast. So I bought the book and I guarantee you I've listened to it at least 50 times. But
Yeah.
this, again, I caddied for Zalatoris when he won the Texas Am and US Junior in 2014, and it is the basis of everything. I think it's page 172 of the Art of Learning. It's the last page of the whatever chapter ends around 169 to 172. The last page of that I literally had printed out and laminated, and I made Will read it on the first and 10th tee of every single round we played that summer. I mean, literally had him read it. Whether he was 5 under at the turn, he still stood on the 10th tee box and read that entire thing. And that laminated thing is still in his yardage book today. Like he can recite it, and it's all about the guy who's going to win is whoever stays the most present in the heat of fire. It's not, it's about remaining present and calm. And so the Art of Learning is by far that thing. But I would add in there, this isn't a book, but the Waking Up app by Sam Harris, which is a meditation app, is definitely the number one recommendation I give people because most of the other, and I think they're getting better. Some people have told me, well, like Headspace and Calm, these things they're better now. But when I used them years ago, it's just like follow your breath and okay, there you go. Now go about your day. Whereas Sam Harris really does a great job of explaining how to integrate the idea of meditation into your daily habits and routines. So I highly suggest the Waking Up app. I think if you use the code, it's $100 a year. I think if you use the code Decade, you get $20 off. If anyone wants it, I don't get paid anything for it, but I know we set that up a number of years ago. I assume the code still works.
Yeah. And then the other question is, if you could give one tip to junior collegiate golfers, what would that one tip be?
I would say learn Decade, but I feel like that's a cheat because now I'm saying that I'm not even saying that because of making money. I'm saying that because that's the way to give about 100 tips in one tip.
Yeah.
I mean, but honestly, like I really, and again, like I do hate saying that because I hate feeling like I'm shilling my product, but I really would say learning Decade. I mean, if you're frustrated thinking you have left strokes on the course, it's you'll learn how to stop doing that in the app. I mean, that's just all there is to it. And again, I get more feedback, and again, just the amount of young players that I've worked with on tour. I mean, it really does work. So, you know, the number one advice would be to learn to meditate, honestly, because that's going to help you in your life. It's just a one soundbite thing, but all of that's included in the Decade app too. So I feel bad. I don't like shilling, but if I would give anything, you just wouldn't. Walking around the PGA show last week, it was weird being mini celebrity there, like actually having people coming up and asking to take their picture with me. I'm like, is this just so you can send to your friends? The asshole actually did it. He thinks I cared. I think it's bizarre. But the amount of people that came up to me just consistently and say, I wish I knew this when I was younger. Like just the years. That's why I named it Decade. I mean, Zalator sent me a text after the Texas Am in 2014 that just said, "You've given me 25 years experience in 5 days." Like I agree with that wholeheartedly. It is what the game is all about.
Yeah. And in the rare instance that somebody's listening to this who doesn't already know where they can find Decade, where can they find out more and purchase it?
Just in your app store, you can get it there. Month one is free, uh, or obviously decade.golf.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Perfect Par podcast. You can find out more about my guest in this episode and where you can find them in the episode description. You can also find out more about me and shorter podcast clips on my Instagram at carter.straup or my Twitter at carterstraup.